Namaste.
Namaste.
Professor Gangeya Mukherji, our distinguished speaker today, Dr. Gitesh Nirban, co-convener of the webinar series. Dear viewers interested in Mahabharata scholarship, I welcome you all to our webinar series on Mahabharata, initiated under the project Yoga Consciousness in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, the ethical value of societal and political well-being, which is taken up under the scheme for promotion of research, academic research and collaboration, Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. Our team includes Professor Vishwa Adluri, Professor of Philosophy, Hunter College, USA, Dr. Joydeep Bagchi, Hindu University of America, USA, Dr. Gitesh Nirban, Kamala Nehru College, Delhi University, Delhi, and Professor Bala, me, who is presently heading the Department of Philosophy at the University of Delhi. And we have an extended team of scholars who have been supporting us. Ms. Jayashree and Ms. Anmol, these are research fellows of the project, and Ms. Deepshika and Ms. Megha are a part of the extended team that we have to work on this project. As I have already mentioned, the title of the project is Yoga Consciousness in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, the ethical value of societal and political well-being. And this project is taken up with the aim to build a new approach to yoga that combines theoretical and practical perspectives. And it also aims to understand yoga beyond a set of practices as an overarching term of salvic practices and to see how it is embedded in social and political reality. It also aims to reappropriate texts of classical Hinduism, which have suffered from Orientalist approaches, in order to articulate the vision of yoga consciousness. And we aim to demonstrate how answers to questions of right action at societal and political levels can be explored through the conception of yoga consciousness in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita that transcends sectarian and doctrinal boundaries to create a global system of thought and practice. And finally, the aim of the project is also to explicate the universal philanthropic and humanitarian aspects of Hinduism as echoed in Mahabharata. That's the major concern of the work of the project that we have taken up. And one of the very primary pointed questions that we are trying to deal with in this project is what is the right course of action? And we already had lectures on yoga consciousness. We had a couple of lectures on societal well-being and political well-being as well. Now we have a wonderful scholar with us, Professor Gangeya Mukherji, who would be talking on Yakshaprasna and Yudhishthira, a conversation of Dharma ethics. And this particular aspect of Mahabharata, where there is a conversation, okay, it's a serious conversation that happens. There could be many sorts of conversations, many sorts of dialogues that can happen, but this particular conversation in Mahabharata is unique from other ones in the sense that it is a kind of modern day rapid fire kind of questions that the Yaksha, no, in the form of Baka, poses questions to Dharmaraja, Yudhishthira, and Yudhishthira is supposed to answer them in a quick succession. And it is also not just questions which are related to the knowledge. These are questions that look to be very factual, but which would be which have a symbolic meaning and purport. Especially, I was stumbled upon one set of questions, and each question is also not one question. It is set of questions that come in the form of one question, and Yudhishthira has to answer them, which makes the whole process very interesting. And I think this is the most appropriate thing for the contemporary times to get into. Read the questions and see what kind of answers that Yudhishthira is providing and relate it to the contemporary times and to each one of us It's really going to make a lot of difference to our lives if we revisit these Yakshaprasnas. There are one set of questions which are directly related to the main concern of the project that I have mentioned. What is the right course of action, right? If we have to address this right course of action for human beings, like each one of us at every point of time come across this question: what is my right course of action that I should take up immediately? There is one question where Yaksha asks, like, what is ignorance? What is pride? What is idleness? And what is grief? No? The answers that Dharmaraja Yudhishthira gives are really so pertinent to the contemporary times. At any point of time, like beyond space and time, these questions are important and relevant. He says, ignorance is not knowing our duties. If you don't know your duties, that's what is ignorance. And pride is believing that you are the agent who is doing it. And idleness is not discharging one's duties. Okay, ignorance is okay, but if you know it and if you don't discharge your duties, that's what is idleness. And grief is ignorance itself is grief. That's what he tries to tell us. And this is so important for the project, so important for social action, political action, ethical action, any sort of human action, voluntary human action. These questions are so important. And that is how revisiting through the lens of Professor Gangeya Mukherji, these questions would be very important to each one of us. And I'm so happy that he has chosen this theme for our discussion today. And I request Dr. Geetesh to introduce Dr. Gangeya Mukherji and go further with the proceedings. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Bala. Namaskar. A very good afternoon to all and warm wishes for the 74th Independence Day. With all gratitude in our heart, I welcome our esteemed speaker, Dr. Gangeya Mukherji, as well as all the participants for being with us on the MHRD Spark Project's webinar series on Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, which we are conducting under the aegis of the ongoing project on yoga consciousness in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, an ethical ideal for societal and political well-being, the details of which Professor Bala just shared with all of us. Before I proceed with the formal introduction of Dr. Mukherji, I request all the participants to keep their audio muted and videos off so that we can have a seamless flow in today's session too. You can send in your questions in the chat box and we'll ensure to take as many questions as possible within that 30 minutes time slot for Q&A, which will be after the address of 45 minutes by the esteemed speaker. I now go on to the formal introduction. Dr. Gangeya Mukherji, our speaker for today, teaches English at Mahamati Prannath Mahavidyalaya, Mao, Chitrakoot in Uttar Pradesh. He was fellow at Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla from 2008 to 2010 and was associated with the Sabarmati Ashram Preservation and Memorial Trust from May to June 2017. He has been the visiting professor at the School of Arts and Sciences, Ahmedabad University in 2018. His academic interest consists in intellectual history with a focus on the imagining of modern India with special reference to 19th and early 20th century Bengal, Vivekananda, Tagore, Gandhi, post-colonialism, and yes, Mahabharata. With all these various ideas that he have been portraying, he has published extensively the articles, the chapters, the books. To mention just a few, he's the author of Gandhi and Tagore, Politics, Truth and Conscience, Rutledge 2016, and An Alternative Idea of India, Tagore and Vivekananda from Rutledge 2011. He has edited Learning Nonviolence, which got published in 2016 from OUP, and has co-edited Exploring Agency in the Mahabharata, Ethical and Political Dimensions of Dharma, again from Rutledge in 2018. He's presently researching for Gandhi, a contemporary reader. Dr. Mukherji, we are very honored to have you amongst us. And as already shared, the topic of his address is Yakshaprasna and Yudhishthira, a conversation on Dharma and ethics. I now hand it over to Dr. Gangeya Mukherji.
Thank you and namaskar, Professor Bala and Professor Gitesh. I thank you for the privilege and the honor that you have done to me by inviting me to be part of this brilliant and extremely significant project that you have begun with the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. It is significant that the epics are now, for the last some years, being studied as a repository, not merely of scriptural wisdom, but of a hard discourse, of a very hard material conversation as regards the right course of action, and also the feelings, what I. Richards would call the appetencies that impede sometimes or felicitate equally the right course of action that is to be followed at every given moment of time. And the right course of action, obviously, is not always contingent on one's immediate well-being. That becomes important. That the immediate scenario, while embarking or opting and embarking on a particular course of action, might not seem at that moment of time in utilitarian terms very beneficial, but it might be proven to be the auspicious and the beneficial thing. Mangalik is the word. With subsequent as time unfolds. So once again I am privileged to be to be part of this conversation, and I expect and I hope to and look forward to learning from the conversation that follows from my presentation. Now, why the Yakshaprasna, and specifically why Yudhishthira's conversation with the Yaksha? The word conversation, I opted for the word conversation, discarding discourse, discarding definition, because defining itself connotes a magisterial, it has a magisterial connotation, that as if somebody has finally passed judgment on it. It is done at a very troubled moment in Yudhishthira's life, as we shall see later on as we move along with the presentation. But this episode itself contains within itself the question of moral agency in adverse circumstance. Even the possibility or the stark visibility of irreparable loss, the question of values, cosmic Rita, which is the logos, the controlling principle of the universe, or the temporal, as opposed to temporary, the temporal alaukik dharma. Even the question of the ultimate goal of human life, which is highlighted at the very end of the epic.
Please go ahead. Professor Mukherji,
so in the end, in the very end of the epic, when Vaishampayan spells out the structure of the epic to Janmejaya, and he says that, O king, as was recounted by Vyas, interestingly, it takes a reverse view or an original view of the development of the epic. As we all know, the prevalent view is that that Mahabharata has three progressive versions: Jai Sanghita, Bharat Samhita and then the Mahabharat Samhita. With, of course, with the accompanying theory of, just a moment. Now, is it all right?
Yes.
Right. Better.
So, Vyas, as Janmejaya says, Vyas recounts that initially Vyas created an epic of 60 lakh verses, and 30 lakh verses were recited to the gods in the Devlok by Narad. After that, 15 lakh verses were recited to the ancestors, or our mains as they are called in the Pitrilok, by Asit Deval, followed by 14 lakh verses recited to the Yakshas and the Rakshasas by Shukdev, and 1 lakh verses recited originally by Vaishampayan to the human world, to the human beings. Now, after setting out this structure, towards the very end of the epic, Vyas in his famous verse says that here I am standing with raised hands, and saying with raised hands that the performance of Dharma bestows moksha as well as calm and artha, but no one listens to me. And this is followed by the shlok, unequivocal shlok: do not renounce Dharma out of desire, fear, greed, or even for saving your own life. Dharma is eternal, whereas joy and sorrow are fleeting. In the same manner, the soul is eternal, and the reasons for its bondage are temporary. Now, in this unequivocal statement regarding the aim of the epic, the aim of the recital of the epic, my argument will be that the ideal moral agent, that the issue of the ideal moral agent is framed, in my argument, in the larger premise that the ultimate achievement of agency is to render itself unnecessary and in its own cessation. It might seem startling that what is this agency? How is agency works? How does agency work towards its own cessation? How does the validation of agency, the sarthak pursuance of agency, leads to itself rendering itself as unnecessary and therefore ending itself? We'll come to the question at the end of towards the close of the paper presentation. Now, why and how the significance of this episode can also be gleaned from the situation of the episode in the narrative structure of the epic. It is situated towards the close of one parv, towards the end of the period of 12 years exile in the forest, and just before the commencement of the final year of Agyatwas, the year where they are enjoined, they are required to hide themselves and resist being discovered. War has begun to seem an ominous future presence already, with injustice of the Hastinapur court and the continuous travail, not only the current 12-year exile, but the Lakshagraha, the poisoning of Bhim, the earlier sojourn in the forest, all of them have begun to constantly rankle with particularly the 4 Pandava brothers and Draupadi. And they occasionally, when they are fed up with an immediate hardship, with an immediate occasion of hardship, they even blame Yudhishthira's rashness. Of course, rashness as personified for them as exemplified for them in the gambling, in his rash move to stake his brothers, his kingdom, and Draupadi, and paradoxically his softness, his mercy, his forgiveness, his adherence to the vow that I will not come and stake my claim for the kingdom before 13 years. Now, during the Vanaparv, just before this episode commences, a little before this episode commences, there is a very detailed conversation between the four brothers, Draupadi on one hand and Yudhishthira on the other. And all of them blame Yudhishthira for his, that actually you are soft, why did you do this, why did you behave as you did in the court, in the Sabha Parv, and your subsequent weakness, your forgiveness is weakness, virtue is weakness, and the charge is led by Draupadi. Draupadi questions God's justice. She makes an argument that God is capricious rather than just, and says that the virtues are meaningless as enablers of agency. They function as obstacles to agency. We'll just very briefly see, because they're very powerful words that Draupadi utters. She refers in the beginning to Prahlad and Vali, how Prahlad, the son of Vali, and how Prahlad says that the demerits, how Prahlad says that the people who are not forgiving are damned, and how Vali does not, it cuts no ice with Vali. And Draupadi says that forgiveness is weakness. And she refers to saying that I do not speak, it seemeth that man can never attain. I will refer in the English translation to the earliest translation by Kishori Mohan Ganguly. It seemeth that man can never attain prosperity in this world by virtue, gentleness, forgiveness, straightforwardness, and fear of censure. She says that it is incomprehensible to her that, now I quote, the simple, gentle, liberal, modest, truthful king that Yudhishthira is, could suddenly lose his kingdom, his brothers and wife. And she says that God actually, far from being the dispenser of justice, is capricious, and he plays with his will with human beings. And she says, as a wooden doll is made to move its limbs by the wire puller, so are creatures made to work by the Lord of all. And then she says that I do not speak, O Lord, very highly about God. And she says, the Supreme Lord, according to his pleasure, sporteth with his creatures, creating and destroying them, like a child with his toy of soft earth. Now, this is eerily reminiscent of Shakespeare's play King Lear, when Edgar says, as flies to wanton boys are we to the gods, they kill us for their sport. Now, Yudhishthira again, and Yudhishthira rebukes Draupadi in the course of the conversation. And he says that this is blasphemy. And then she says that actually, no, I'm not blaspheming. I'm only questioning your weakness, your adherence, this senseless adherence to what you say is virtue. Now, I'll straight away flag Yudhishthira's. Yudhishthira gives a very detailed reply, but for our present discussion on virtue, on dharma, Yudhishthira's unambiguous reply, a portion of his reply is, I give away because it is my duty to give. I sacrifice because it is my duty to sacrifice. I accomplish to the best of my power whatever a person living in domesticity should do, regardless of the fact whether those acts have fruits or not. I act virtuously, not from the desire of reaping the fruits of virtue. This will form a very interesting theme in our argument today. I act virtuously, not from the desire of reaping the fruits of virtue, but of not transgressing the ordinances of the Ved, and beholding also the conduct of the good and wise. My heart, O Krishna, is naturally attracted towards virtue. The man who wisheth to reap the fruits of virtue is a trader in virtue. And he uses in Sanskrit, the term is Dharma Vanijik. That actually the person who desires fruits from Dharma, the returns of his dharmic actions is not actually dharmic. He is merely a trader in Dharma. But Yudhishthira puts in a caveat at the end. He says that, that although the trader of Dharma, the Dharma Vanijik, is not worthy of respect, as one should never calculate or even wish for the benefits accruing from one's meritorious actions, he assures Draupadi that it is natural for the virtuous acts to have beneficent consequences, and that she on no account should doubt the quality of divine justice. This will come to haunt Yudhishthira in the end of the Swargarohan Parva. This statement that it's natural for the virtuous acts to have beneficent consequences, and that one should on no account doubt the quality of divine justice. Now let's see how affairs come to that pass. Now, what are the immediately preceding episodes to this episode of Yakshaprasna? In the Vanaparv, in the last section, there is a detailed description of Yudhishthira conversing with sages, Markandeya, Lomash, particularly. So the discourses of the sages, and then again in eventual terms, I mean, eventual as meaning related to events, the abduction and the abduction of Draupadi by Jayadratha, her misery, her pain, and the rescue of Draupadi. Again, this abduction of Draupadi is again in a series, in a line of insults that their wife has suffered at the hands of a human predator. And then after this, when they rescue Draupadi, punish Jayadratha, which is again to result later on in his death, Ram asks Markandeya that whether there has been any king who has been as unfortunate as I have been. And to this, Markandeya recites the story of Ram, abduction of Sita, banishment from his kingdom, and abduction of Sita. And after this story, Yudhishthira asks him, has there been any woman equaling Krishna, that is Draupadi, in virtue? And Markandeya again responds with a narrative of Satyavan and Savitri and Satyavan, of course. This is again followed by in a kind of a narrative flashback or a narrative intercession by the deprivation of Karna's armor and his divine earrings, and the story of Karna's birth. Now, before we come to the Yakshaprasna in proper, the questions and the answers, let us look at the actors, the two main actors in the episode of Yakshaprasna, which is to follow. Now, one is Dharma. There is normally the considered view that Dharmaraj here is not Yamaraj. Yamaraj is the dispenser. He's enjoined to one particular action as a ruler of good and bad after death. He figures, the Yamaraj figures prominently. I mean, he is the main actor in the Savitri's Satyavan episode. But here it is Dharma. And Yudhishthira is the Ansha of Dharma, as is Vidur. What is the objective of this episode? The testing of Yudhishthira's knowledge and practice of Dharma. When he has lived as a kinsman, all of them as has been recognized as obstacles or inclement factors while for the householder when he pursues the path of dharma, because the anchorite living in the forest lives a life of least resistance to dharma. The path of dharma is not cluttered for him. Yudhishthira has already lived the life of a kinsman. He has been king. Now he is leading the life of a mendicant. And not as a mendicant who has sacrificed, renounced human life, but who is in the waiting, who claims and says that he ought to be king because he has kingly virtues. And for him, honesty, dharma, and forgiveness are the kingly virtues. As he has said to responded to Draupadi in the earlier discussion, he said, Duryodhan will not be king because he is not forgiving. I will be king because I am forgiving. Not because it will follow from my acts of forgiveness, but because kingship needs these qualities. It is an essential quality of kingship. It is the essential quality of the ruler, the leader, to be merciful, to be benevolent. Yudhishthira passes the test. We'll come to it later. Now the two actors, one is Dharma, who is here to test Yudhishthira, as in the end of the Swargarohan Parv. The Dharma himself says that I have tested you thrice, twice now. One, when I said that you cannot enter heaven if you are accompanied by the dog, and you passed the test with flying colors. And now, when I have made you visit hell, or the illusion of hell, and here too you have passed, as you passed the test in the first test which I provided you during the Yakshaprasna. Now, what is the character of Yudhishthira? He is the ideal moral agent in the play, no doubt about it. What is now the pervading picture of Yudhishthira? The gambler, the weak person, the person who, for people who have some knowledge of the epic, sometimes some familiarity with some portions of the epic, and specifically the portions of the war which are most immediately attractive, exciting, as one who was roundly defeated by Karna, and Karna simply in his generosity desisted from killing him, and his very intemperate outburst against Arjun, leading to a quarrel between them, the insult to the Gangeya, and Arjun's saying that he had vowed to kill anybody who insulted the Gangeya so as to kill his elder brother. And then Krishna intercedes. Krishna's exasperation, that why do you people are so hell-bent on taking vows and then quickly taking vows and then trying to fulfill them. Now, Yudhishthira's honesty. I mean, even the gambling episode is described by the author of the epic, Krishna Dvaipayan Vyas, in earthly terms, saying that it is more behavioral, it is more as an act of courtesy that Yudhishthira goes, and in the Mahabharata also it says that, we all know that there can be no golden deers, and yet Ram runs after the golden deer, and it is as if saying that it's a divine intercession that Yudhishthira behaves like this. Of course, Yudhishthira is rash, but he is following a gambler's instinct of trying to regain what he has lost. I'm not trying to, of course. This and the one lie that he utters to Drona are blemishes to his otherwise moral agency. But his honesty is non-peril, his forgiveness. He is not the warrior. I mean, David Shulman, in his brilliant essay on the Yakshaprasna, on the first reading, Shulman's essay appears to be problematic, but it is extraordinarily insightful. Of course, he does not subscribe to the cosmological belief, to the cosmological scheme, naturally, on his part. But otherwise, it's very insightful. Some questions are very important in that essay, in the critical essay on this, in this episode. So Now, he is not, Shulman also, like many other, both on the East-West divide, or the Western and Eastern scholars have pointed out that Yudhishthira laments generally when it is too late for him to reverse the decisions. I mean, he embarks on war. But in that entire, in that entire narrative, in that entire narrative, it is spelled out in detail how Yudhishthira tries to resist to the war and how his prophecies come true. Just a moment here, my favorite actually sometimes is a quote from the teaching method of John Rawls. It will appeal to the professors of philosophy who are part of the audience. Now, it is rather inconceivable that a brilliant poet, let us say, if not a seer, even in atemporal terms, a brilliant poet writing a vast epic, and obviously foregrounding Yudhishthira as a moral agent, would leave such blemishes as to undo his entire argument. So what does actually Rawls say to his students? He says that one thing I tried to do was to present each writer's thought in what I took to be its strongest form. I took to heart Mill's remark in his review of Adam Sedgwick: a doctrine is not judged at all until it is judged in its best form. So I tried to do just that. Yet I didn't say, not intentionally in any way, what to my mind they should have said, but what they did say supported to what I view as the most reasonable interpretation of their text. The text had to be known and respected, and the doctrine presented in its best form. Leaving aside the text seemed offensive, a kind of pretending. If I departed from it, no harm in that. I had to say so. Lecturing that way, I believed that the writer's views became stronger and more convincing, and would be for students a more worthy object of study. Several maxims guided me in doing this. I always assumed, for example, that the writers we were studying were always much smarter than I was. If they were not, why was I wasting my time and the students' time by studying them? If I saw a mistake in the arguments, I suppose they saw it too and must have dealt with it. But where? I looked for their way out, not mine. Sometimes their way out was historical. In their day, the question need not be raised, or wouldn't arise, or be fruitfully discussed, or there was a part of the text I had overlooked or hadn't read. A mentor of mine added one more rider. He said, what Rawls had said, or hadn't understood. That I hadn't overlooked, I not read, or I hadn't understood. So let's go back to the text. So towards the end of the Udyogpar, when Krishna is to go to the Kaurav court to negotiate, and Yudhishthira is at the receiving end from his wife and his brothers. Yudhishthira says that because that I do not want war. Why? Because war, he says that the first casualty of the Dharma Yuddha will be Dharma itself. I mean, he prophesies. Then there is Kunti who tells the story of Vidula and Sanjay to Krishna and says that tell him why is he dithering? Why is he not clear about embarking on war? Why has he forgotten the insult to Draupadi? So this is his anishansa, this is ahimsa, his valor in war. He fights very bravely with Bhishma, with Drona. Before he faints at Karna's onslaught, Karna is defeated by Yudhishthira. Karna faints, and when Yudhishthira is about to kill him, he remembers that actually Arjuna has made a vow to kill Karna, and he does not kill Karna. And then Karna revives, and then, I mean, the better known part of the story, that Yudhishthira is defeated, he runs back, he's hurt, his actually vanity is hurt, and then he reproaches Arjuna. After the war, the Stree Parv, and towards till the end of the epic, his unmitigated self-reproach and shame after war even when he is constantly rebuked by Narad, by Vyas, and by Krishna, that what is it that has taken hold of you? Why do you, and when Vyas says that you go ahead, perform an Ashwamedh Yagya. He says, no, I have no money for the Ashwamedh Yagya. I cannot ask money for these young princes who have lost their fathers, the young kings whose wounds are still green, the people of the state who are groaning under the weight of taxes that Duryodhana imposed, and the Swargarohan, which will come back. The Yaksh Parva, actually, the Yakshaprasna is played out again in Swargarohan Parva. Yudhishthira's loneliness is agony. Now, one scholar had opined that there are two aspects of Godhead. Of course, Prakriti and Purush in the Indian cosmological thing. One is the active agency, the active part of the Godhead. Here signified by Arjun, action, and Narayan, of course. This entire, the motive of the Mahabharata. And the other is Vairagya, the withdrawal, and that is signified by Yudhishthira. There is one view. So here, with Yudhishthira, character becomes the theme. There is always a two-way traffic, as all of us know, in philosophical terms, between character and theme, or character and episode, character and argument. Because Dharma, like any theme, it is an argument, it is a principle. But when played out in the nitty-gritty of life, through episodes, through incidents, through a person, the argument is fleshed out. There is always a two-way traffic. The theme can become the character, the character can become the theme. And for Yudhishthira, on the part of Yudhishthira, the theme is Dharma in his part. Now, how is the Yakshaprasna to be followed? We all know that it is an extraordinary act of generosity, one of the many acts that the Pandavas display during their vanvas, their exile in the forest. The Brahman comes saying, my Aruni has been taken, and it is the Aruneya Parva, as it is said. The Aruneya, there are two sticks. Shulman points that out. The male, female. And it is actually the Srishti, the creation of the universe. That is the pervasive theme of the epic in any case. The creation of the epic, the creation of the world, and the maintenance of the world, the maintenance of creation. And they go to drink, then suddenly they lose sight of the deer and they are exhausted, and then again they begin to blame their fate. And Yudhishthira tries to calm their passions, and he says to Nakul, just climb the tree and see if you can see water somewhere. Your brothers are all tired and thirsty. And Nakul goes to the lake. Now what happens? The theme is there an injustice in the brothers being killed? What is this? What does the Yaksha say? The lake has been in my possession. Answer my questions. But somewhere the Pandavas are drunk, or they forgot that actually the Kshatriya gets the power as protector. Now, will you arrogate the resources simply because you need them? They belong to somebody else. They could have said, perhaps, maybe hypothetically, that actually we are tired, we are thirsty. Why don't you let us have some water? I can then go back and send my elder brother. The prospect didn't appeal to them. And then what happens. And when Yudhishthira comes, he's dismayed, but he's not driven out of his mind. He just says that who has done this? He begins to think. And then the questions, of course, follow. Now, these questions perhaps are in the nature of the Brahmodaya riddles. Brahmodaya, or Brahmodaya as they are pronounced, sacred riddles pertaining to sacred knowledge, which are played out among the priests in the yagyas, the Ashwamedh Yagya particularly. What do these questions test? The knowledge of Shruti, the knowledge relating to Veds. Shrauta, that is the symbolism of the sacrifice. Who rises the sun? Who stays with it? Questions of existential philosophy, and some questions like those four almost jejune questions about as to which creature doesn't shut its eyes when sleeping, which creature, which article doesn't have a stone, what is that which doth not close his eyes while asleep? What is that which does not move after birth? What is that which is without heart? And what is that which swells with its own impetus? Now, some scholars have opined that it is not merely a basic riddle about existence, but it combines philosophy of Nyaya as to the Purush being sentient, but motivating creation. And interestingly, just before the Yakshaprasna episode, a little while earlier than the episode of Yakshaprasna, these four questions occur verbatim. These are the questions asked by Janak from Ashtavakra. When Ashtavakra goes to Janak's court, and these questions and their answers, the answers given by Ashtavakra is related by Lomash Rishi to Yudhishthira. And these are the answers given by Ashtavakra are given by Yudhishthira to Yaksha. So it tests both the knowledge, the person who is well versed in the cosmic law, and the preoccupation with Mahabharata is, as your project rightly states, the ethical well-being. How is temporal society, temporal existence systematized in society to be maintained? What are the operating principles of that society? I'm not going, the questions are fairly well known. So I'll just go deal with the import of the questions and then move ahead. And then finally, there is a slight discrepancy in some texts, because as Shulman rightly points out, that what he calls the Vulgate, or of course, pertaining to the Bible, the term pertains to the Bible. But here it means any text, the generally accepted recension of the text. And I was struck with the Gita Press edition in Hindi. It has, when he asks that who is happy, who is the ideal companion, and then the Gita Press says, drink water and take as much as you can. But inexplicably, the translation by Kishori Mohan Ganguly is, and let your brothers live. There is, textually, there's a small problem because it's contradictory. But then why should the Dharmaraj ask later that which of the brothers should I revive? Which of your 4 slain brothers do you want to be brought back to life? If he has said that as a condition to a question that answer these questions and let your brothers live. So it doesn't make sense. But then we proceed to the end, and then this question. I mean, there are some pervasive themes which are visible, and when he says that who is the best friend, the wife is the best friend. Of course, the eulogy to the wife in the Yoga Vasishtha, that the wife is the ideal servant, the friend, the brother, the lover, the wife, the guru. The wife fulfills a group of roles. Now, then the most important, you have answered. Yudhishthira seems to be answered the questions well. Anybody with knowledge perhaps can. But then the crucial test is, which of your 4 brothers shall I revive? And he says, Madri's son, Nakul. So, here at this particular point, he is to claim his kingdom. He is to go back. And he knows that without Arjun, without Bhim, he is crippled. He has no resources. He has all chance. If there is a war if the issue is to be forced, in so many words, he loses all chance. So that is the test, that when your survival is at stake, when the fruits of your life are at stake, what option will you take? And he says that I want. No, there is also a subtle point here. It is, all of us know, and Mukund Lat in his Dharma Sankat makes this point very powerfully, that this is the Parartha Bhav. It is not, it is Anshans, non-cruelty. He protects emotion, the emotion of somebody who is related to him, who may have died, but whose desire when his stepmother lived, he wants to fulfill. The Parartha Bhav. What is the Parartha Bhav? It is somewhat different from Atmavat Sarva Bhuteshu, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Going by the epic, going by Yudhishthira's character, for him, a son is not such a terribly essential component in life. In the Adiparv itself, in the story of Shakuntala, in the Adiparv, not Vigyan Shakuntal, Kalidas's version, Shakuntala tells Dushyant that truth is greater, and she says what Gandhi says in his second variant of truth, that truth is God. This actually occurs in the Adiparv, when Shakuntala says that truth is God. The truth is greater than so many. I mean, a son is greater than every good deed, and truth is greater than 1,000 sons, and truth is everything, she says. Truth is God. So if you deny your son, you are denying truth, because your son, truthfully, verily is your son. And in denying truth, you are being divorced from truth. And in being divorced from truth, you are being divorced from God. So this becomes a theme in the Adiparv itself, in that story. So what is the Atmavat Sarva Bhuteshu, this doing others as you would have others do unto you? But the Parartha Bhav is, Yudhishthira actually, for him truth, like Shakuntala says, is greater. I mean, here he doesn't have to sacrifice his sons. He says that for him, the desire for son is not so important as Madri's, as any ordinary persons would have been. And he takes himself out of the equation psychologically. He stands in Madri's shoes, as they say, and tries to imagine if Madri was alive, faced with the death of her son, and the possibility of one son being revived, what would she have wished? She would have wished one of her sons to live. And Yudhishthira, actually, in a negative capability, as Keats said of Shakespeare, he says that let Madri's son live. And Yaksha tests him, saying that, what will Nakul accomplish for you? And so this is the test. This is as different from a catechism, that you recite the answers which have been told to you. This is the ordeal. So later, till the Swargarohan Parv, it seems how Yudhishthira sticks to truth, to Dharma as he sees. I believe we are approaching the end of our time. Is it? Professor Bala, how much time do I have? Professor Gitesh?
You can take some more time.
Acha, okay. Then good. In the war, barring that one act that when he lies to Drona as to Ashwatthama's death, Yudhishthira generally stays true to what he perceives as Dharma. Of course, when in the Ashram Vasik Parva, when this heart-rending episode when Dhritarashtra wants to go away, he feels constantly insulted, slighted, and he says that the servants and others respect me only out of fear of Yudhishthira. And then Yudhishthira actually comes to know that Dhritarashtra hasn't eaten in a couple of days, and he goes and says that I want to leave, I want to go away to the forest. I am ashamed. Because he constantly blames himself. I have committed all this massacre that has been committed before because of my greed, my attachment to my claim of kingship. And ultimately, by your leaving for forest, I am damned forever. So let me leave. And so it continues. And when finally in the Swargarohan Parv, again, the death of his four brothers, now joined with Draupadi, happens on the way to the mountain. It happens twice. The brothers again die before him. And here he, like the earlier episode, he doesn't lose his composure. He doesn't lose his calm. And Bhim asks him touchingly. It is Bhim continues to ask, why has she fallen? Why has she fallen? So he says one. So here there is the faults which he enumerates of Draupadi and his four brothers sequentially are not as great as to send them to hell, but they are to effectively bar their ascendancy to Swarga. They have forfeited that right to ascend to Swarga in their bodies. And then he is tested again by Dharma, that you actually leave this dog, you have left your brothers, you have left you left your wife, why this attachment to the dog? He says, no, I am not attached to the dog. It is the principle of Dharma, that somebody who has taken refuge on you, somebody who depends on you, you cannot forsake. So I'm ready to, not to. And then again his going to hell. When he sees, why? When he sees Duryodhan, he just bursts out. Why is this wretch sitting here? And then he's told that your brothers, along with Karn, he actually now begins to, he says that there's a very touching episode in the Stree Parv when Kunti tells him to perform oblations for Karn. He says, why should I do so? And what does he say? What does he say when Kunti points out that Karn was my son and so your brother? And then he says that actually, whenever he remembers, he suddenly remembers. It's a poetic conceit, very beautifully put, because after all, it's also a work of literature. That whenever Karn on occasions used to slight, used to insult, used to provoke, I was upset, hurt, and angry. But when my eyes, I glanced at Karn's feet, by chance my vision, my eyes alighted on Karn's feet, my anger would subside. Why? Because Karn's feet resembled the feet of my mother. The physical resemblance of Karna to Kunti. Karna's feet resembled those of my mother. So, these touching incidents. And this incident in Stree Parv itself, when Yudhishthira is standing on the banks of Ganga and the lamenting woman, one can imagine that scene, that he stands in darkness and hears the women reproaching him. Now, after all this, when he's told that your brothers and your wife are in hell, the author purposefully describes his discomfiture in hell. And he asks the messenger of the gods that, how far? He is now at the end of his tether. And when he's about to faint, this is you've come. And then, of course, the well-known, that is the voices of his wife, of his brother come wafting to him that your presence here soothes us. So stay, and he opts to stay. And then happens what? What Shulman points out, that he's cursing the gods. That he curses the gods. Now, the precise word in Mahabharata is Garehamas. And Garehamas in Hindi is Kosna, which comes closer to cursing, but it is actually the censure of the gods. Garehamas is censuring. He censures the gods. There is only one shlok. What does he censure the gods for? It is just written that he censures the gods in anguish. And just then Dharmaraj once again comes and says that this is a test which has happened. And it is explained that Duryodhana has also committed good deeds, and the deeds which are lesser in number, whether evil or good, are experienced, the fruits are experienced, enjoyed first. So they have to actually spend time in Swarg first, and then go down to hell. And your brothers and wife have to first experience the fruits of their ill actions, and then ascend to heaven. But this censuring of the gods, What is this censuring of the gods? Schulman actually, with his, of course, as with most of us, he, with his Semitic, with his proficiency in Semitic texts also, the book of Job is, the curse of Job is very, very strongly, not written, not expressed, but it is strongly in his mind. So the word curse. But he censures the gods. They only censure them. Why? Because the protection of the Rit, the protection of Dharma, is also the duty of the gods. And it seems to Yudhishthira that the gods have failed to dispense according to the principles of Dharma. They have neglected their duty to protect the Dharma. Now, his doubt is explained. That no, we have not failed. This is dispensing as to the fruits of actions. But now I have come to the end of my story. What is this fruit of action? Going back to the first, my premise that actually the ultimate achievement of agency is to render itself unnecessary and to lead to its cessation. When is agency in most schools of Indic philosophy, where does agency become unnecessary? At the point of moksha, of liberation. The goal of Dharma is not only to provide earth and calm, which Vyas says, that not only moksha, but earth and calm will flow from Dharma. Now we come to the ultimate goal of Dharma, that is, it cannot be willed, but the ultimate goal of human life is realization of self-realization, the soul realizing itself. And where, especially with Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, and mostly with other themes, with other schools of philosophy also, with Sankhya, and specifically with the Bhagavad Gita, that ultimately agency becomes unnecessary at the point of liberation, where the soul now needs no action. There are no fruits of action, because the fruits of action mind. The fruits of even of good action mind. So as if with one violent rupture, the one remaining bond in Yudhishthira's mind as to the fruit of Dharma is torn away, is taken away. That actually there are the three gunas, tamas, rajas and sattva. Tamas and rajas gun bind very strongly. They are not enablers. The self is not in control of itself. With tamas most noticeably, and with rajas also, they delude. But with satgun, even the fruits of the action flowing from satgun will bind. But satgun, the fruits done out of satgun will promote this journey, will promote this realization, will enable the realization that I need to eschew all notion of fruitfulness, but because ultimately the liberation means non-existence. And non-existence will mean non-striving, non-becoming of every kind. So ultimately it is a state of unbecoming on the part of the individual soul. That is, for the Bhagavad Gita also, the ultimate reality. And therefore, agency of rajas, of tamas, of rajas, and specifically of sattva is for the soul to realize. And the difference in the three, that the moral act, the dharmic act, the performance of dharma, as opposed to other paths, will facilitate action. Ultimately, this overt association will end. It has to end. Otherwise, there is no reality. The ultimate reality, the paramartha, the realization of the paramarthic realization will flow from this permanent, from this final eschewal of all expectation as to the fruits of my action performed. And how will I reach this end? This end This end can be facilitated by the most exacting exercise of dharma, by the most exacting, by the most careful exercise of my dharmic agency. So, because as one puts it, as one very prominent view puts it, that creation by the will of the creator is synonymous with the creation of truth and dharma, of rit. And then the root of satya, of truth, is sat, which means to exist, and that which is good. Normally, we today use the words as truthfulness, which is the vachik satya, the satya which is uttered. Truth is what exists and it is beneficial. That which really exists, in a way, an attribute of God. God being without attributes, but the quality of the God is beneficial, is auspicious. So since the epic is a work of literature, and since life itself in that case is an illustration of a reality that cannot be actually painted, as all illustration cannot, as any illustration of anything, it cannot actually spell out the last subtle link with its object, what it is illustrating. The illustrated cannot be depicted concretely in an illustration. The last link is always subtle and has to be realized. It cannot be seen, it cannot be stated. Perhaps in this episode, the Yakshaprasna, culminating in the Swargarohan, it actually provides this missing link, unsaid, unwritten, unstated, which only takes away, dilutes the hardness, the hard truth of the epic. In this, the hard truth of the epic is preserved when Yudhishthira perhaps comes to realize that what fruits of dharma are you talking about? Why then do you censure the gods? This question is not asked, but it is spelled out by Krishna himself in the Ashramvasik Parva, when he says to Yudhishthira that why are you sad? This mamata is the ultimate bondage. The 3 syllables, as he says, idam nam namam, this is not mine, is the key to liberation. Perhaps this is the validity of the Yakshaprasna. This is the validity, this proof that Yudhishthira holds true to his concept of dharma as he presents to the Yaksha in the Yakshaprasna. Thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you again for giving me this honor today. Thank you.
Dr. Pala, unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, Professor Gangeya Mukherji, for this wonderful exposition. In fact, I would call it expository analysis that you have done of Yakshaprasna by providing its background and also placing it in the proper context and helping us to understand the philosophical purport of it by calling it to be the work of literature and a text of illustration of life. Dr. Gitesh.
Thank you, Dr. Mukherji. Thank you, Dr. Pala. I take this opportunity to go back again to what Dr. Mukherji started with, his address. He pointed out Yudhishthira's statement saying, I act virtuously, not from the desire of reaping the fruits of virtues. That is, living by virtue for the sake of virtue. Yes. Yudhishthira is one of the characters in the epic who tries his best to let all other 3 Purusharthas be governed by dharma by far possible. Though the epic explicates that path guided by dharma is never easy, portraying before us all possible conflicting human situations and many moral dilemmas. Yet it emanates at the end of it the very message of maintaining ethical well-being for the societal well-being. Dharma ought to be followed, and Yaksha's questions and Yudhishthira's responses are the reiteration of the same pointer. Dharma ought to be followed. Thank you, Dr. Mukherji, for revisiting, or I must say, making us all revisit the Yakshaprasnas, because this conversation on Dharma has far more relevance, as Dr. Bala pointed out also, in the contemporary situation than any other time. On behalf of our whole team of Spark Project, that is Professor Bala, our two scholars, Jayashri, Anmol, our extended team consisting of Megha, Deepshika, and I, all of us extend our heartiest gratitude and thank you, Dr. Mukherji, for being with us. We've had little connectivity issues, yet you made in, and I must appreciate our participants that during this whole course of internet connectivity and not connectivity, not a single participant left. I think this comes as a very important pointer for us to reflect that the participants here are really interested in knowing about the epic. They come almost every Saturday at a particular time to join us, which is a great source of encouragement to the whole team. It actually pushes us to keep organizing every Saturday a webinar for you. So on behalf of the team, I thank everyone, our esteemed speaker, our whole team, as well as all the participants, because without participants, we cannot do any of these webinars as successfully as we are doing today. Herein, I would even like to request all of you to follow our social media handles, as well as share whatever we are uploading, because this will help us to reach many more people who may not be aware of what is going on regarding this Mahabharata series. And Dr. Mukherji, I would like to convey to you, though Professor Bala must have already shared, that this is a platform wherein there are scholars, there are professors, there are undergraduate students too. That is why sometimes the questions turn out to be very simple. Thank you for cooperating with us all through, and wish you all a wonderful evening, and namaskar from the whole team. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Namaste. Thank you.